New Orleans signed CJ Spiller for something other than sitting on the fucking bench.
31 other passes that should have been intercepted with you.
So that's why I have David Johnson on my board higher.
If you're doing a live draft, wait till you're drunk to draft this guy. We welcome you to the Fifth Down! What up, Fifth Downers? This is Johnny Slokes, and you're listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast. We recorded earlier, but for some reason it did not work, and it just pisses me the fuck off. I'm not happy that I have to redo this, but here we are. This is their Week 13 Waiver Wire show. K-Mill was on the show earlier, but like I said, for some reason, only my voice recorded, not his. It's a fucked up situation that I'm not happy about, but I'm going to redo this show for you listeners. I had my transition class to go from the military to the civilian world because, for some reason they feel like that we are just not able to do that on our own, and we need some help, which I could see why in some regards, but the lady that was in charge of it today, she's kind of messed up lady. She was like, you know what, with a show of hands, just raise your hand if you're going to commit suicide once you guys know the military. I was like, wow, that's, pretty fucked up, but, it is what it is. We'll get into some of the news notes. Derek Carr, yesterday, he dislocated his pinky in 2 different places, but the good news is that there's a couple of good news. One, he did not have any breaks. It was dislocated in 2 different places. There was no breaks. And he was able to come back and play in that game. He only missed 1 series. He came back for 1 series and threw an interception. But then after that, he returned and he led Oakland to come from behind victory to lead them to 9-2. They're in first place of the AFC West. That guy, what a gutsy performance by Derek Carr. I really love that young guy. Head coach Mike McCoy says that Tyrell Williams, his shoulder, quote, it's good. But can't really trust everything that a head coach says. But if he says it's good, we'll have to monitor the situation going forward. It does look like Tyrell Williams' shoulder is good to go for Week 13. They did lose Travis Benjamin for a little bit. He finally got healthy, so hopefully they both can stay healthy because, I think they both opened up the field for each other. We already touched a little bit on Jordan Reed's grade 3 shoulder separation. He already said, actually today, that I have no idea if I can play, so, I kind of think he's going to miss some time because that kind of injury really limits your range of motion. Right now it's at 30%, and that is no good. T.Y. Hilton, he left Thanksgiving Day game with a back injury, but he practiced today, so it looks like he is on track to play for Week 13. That is good. It also looks like Andrew Luck is going to play Week 13. He is on track to play today. He's on track to play Week 13. He practiced today, so they're both in. Indianapolis' offense is looking good. Some injury notes that are not necessarily fantasy-worthy, but a little bit it is. Trevathan, the linebacker for the Chicago Bears, done for the year. And the Bears have been one of the better teams at defending the tight end, and a lot of that has to do with Trevathan. So the fact that he is out for the year, if you have a tight end matching up with the Chicago Bears, not as scary. So that's a good sign. And last but not least, Robert Woods. He's targeting a return for Week 15. And, that's good. Sammy Watkins is going to be fully healthy by then, hopefully. And if Robert Woods returns Week 15, that just gives, less attention towards Sammy Watkins if he is healthy. So it's nothing but good news for Sammy Watkins. That's the only reason why I brought that news up. All right. So let's get into. We'll start at the quarterback position. Some of the heroes that I have at the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins had an amazing week. He was 41 of 53 for 449 yards and 3 touchdowns, completely shredding the Dallas Cowboys in a losing effort, though, of course, Dallas Cowboys won 10 in a row right now. It's kind of amazing, but, I will say that they have kind of a weaker schedule going into this year, so it's totally not unexpected, but Kirk Cousins really ripped him a new one. Another really good performance was Drew Brees going 28 of 36 for 310 yards and 4 touchdowns. Great performance against the LA Rams, who actually came into that game with the 5th-ranked passing defense. So, pretty good performance by Drew Brees. A vintage performance by him. There's 3 really shocking surprises from the quarterback position. Trevor Siemian went 20 of 34 for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns out of nowhere against the Kansas City defense that's been pretty good lately, and he did pretty good against them. That's kind of surprising. I did not expect that. Josh McCown, he went 25 of 43, 322 yards. He only had 1 touchdown, but I guess there's been worse performances than that by him, so that's actually pretty good. Matt Barkley, he went 28 for 54. That's almost 50%. It's a little bit over 50%. He went for 316 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did get picked off twice. The Bears were in a losing effort, obviously. Last but not least, we already touched on a little bit. Derek Carr, 26 of 38 for 315 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did get picked off once on the very first series. He came back from dislocating his pinky. Other than that, he was pretty good that entire game. So we're not worried about him going into next week. Some of the zeros for quarterback. We had Brock Osweiler, he threw 3 interceptions. It's really sad to say, but that's almost the norm for him this year. Just thank God the Denver Broncos he turned them down for $16 million because the Broncos would be in an even worse situation than they already are with Simeon. So Brock Osweiler, he's not doing good. Another one of my zeros of the second week in a row he's made this list is Andy Dalton. I know he had almost 200. He had 284 yards, but he fumbled twice. One of them cost them the game. He only completed 54% of his passes, and that offense is not looking good. Obviously, it's not looking good with A.J. Green and Giovanni Bernard out for the year. Well, maybe A.J. Green out for the year, but anyways, they're both out, and that doesn't help the situation any. We'll get into more about who is his number 1 receiver later on in this show. Let's go over to running backs, some of the 100-yard rushers this week. Mark Ingram, coming back off of a concussion injury, he ran for 146 yards off 14 carries. He did score 1 time, so tipping my hat to him. He really came through in that game. Obviously, it was a high-scoring game, so it was pretty easy for him to perform. Le'Veon Bell, 23 carries for 120 yards and 1 touchdown. I believe he also had another 30 yards receiving. It was a great Thanksgiving feast for him against the Indianapolis Colts. They had no answer for him. He just did Le'Veon Bell-like things to them. That's pretty much what you can expect going forward. But not, Colin Kaepernick made this list. He probably should have been one of my heroes for the quarterbacks. He had 10 carries for 113 yards. He also had 296 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. So, Colin Kaepernick, if you streamed him against the Miami Dolphins, you did a good job, and you're probably very happy that you did. And we'll get into him in a little bit later on in this show because we got some bones to pick with him. Our last 100-yard performer was LaShawn McCoy. He ran 19 times for 103 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, one of them being a 75-yard touchdown. So, I mean, if you take that 75-yard touchdown away, he only had 18 carries for 28 yards and a touchdown. So, keep that in mind. But, you know, you're not going to complain about a long touchdown ever. So, good for him. Some of the running back zeros I have, Thomas Rules, we were expecting a lot out of him going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, the entire Seattle offense was no good. They put up 5 points. It was a complete shocker. You can look for him to rebound next week because, I mean, it's not something that's going to happen every week. At least you hope not. But he is a zero, definitely a zero this week. Another zero, DeMarco Murray. He ran 17 times for 43 yards. He probably saved his day in PPR leagues with 5 catches and 41 yards, but easily one of his lowest outputs of the year. So that's a disappointment, especially against the Chicago Bears. I know I think they were like number 12 against the run, so they weren't terrible against the run, but I mean, you were expecting more out of him in a run-heavy setting. You'd think that he'd do more, you know? Let's go over to wide receiver. Some of the heroes I have at wide receiver. There's a lot of guys that have 100 yards. Some of the guys, there's 4 guys that really stuck out to me, though. If you're listening to the last show, I did say Emmanuel Sanders could really have a breakout game against the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, the Chiefs, their corners, they're a bit slower. I think Gaines runs like a 4.6. I think Peters runs like a 4.5. I said, you know what, I think the Sanders could exploit those corners, and he did. 7 catches, 162 yards. He scored a touchdown. I wasn't expecting 162 yards, but I was expecting him to have a pretty good game, and it showed. Another guy that really stuck out to me is it looks like Marquise Wilson is the number 1 receiver over there in Chicago for the time being. He had 8 catches, 125 yards, and 1 touchdown. I believe he had 9 targets, which probably led the team. So, I mean, I was hitting out a little bit last show. I was like, you know what, this might be a deeper league ad that could be nice. And you know what, maybe he is the number 1 receiver over there in Chicago. He definitely outperformed Cameron Meredith. So, I mean, he's definitely worth an ad. And he's definitely, I mean, this is the Waiver Wire show. This is what we do. You should add him. A couple of guys that also stuck out to me. Michael Thomas, after having a couple of quiet weeks, rebounded bigly against the LA Rams. 9 catches, 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, a lot of that had to do with Brandon Cooks not getting a single target. Mike Evans, 8 catches, 104 yards. He also had 2 touchdowns. Big week for him against the Seattle Seahawks, folks. And he was a monster. I thought maybe Richard Sherman could hold him down, but that was not the case. He was having his way. He won the physical battle, and it was good. He had both of Tampa Bay's touchdowns. I don't know if we touched on it yet, but David Johnson, the running back from Arizona, he had 8 catches, 103 yards with a touchdown receiving. I think he only had like 50-something yards rushing, but still, nonetheless, big day for him. We go over to some of the zeros for wide receiver. I got 3 of them. Obviously, Brandon Cooks, he didn't even get targeted. Put up a big donut for you. Same thing with Sterling Shepard. He did not get targeted against the Cleveland Browns. Put up a big donut for you. That is not what you want. Allen Robinson, he only had 2 catches for 24 yards. A lot of that had to do with Blake Bortles. He only passed for like 126 yards. I mean, he's just a bad quarterback. Plain and simple. As long as he's the quarterback, I can't trust Allen Robinson as long as he's the quarterback. I'm sorry, folks. If we go over to the tight end position, my hero of the week for tight ends, Travis Kelce, 8 catches, 101 yards. Thank God Macklin is out. Maybe he didn't do as well as Macklin was playing, but against Denver, he had over 100 yards. He was my hero of the week for tight end. I got a couple of zeros at tight end. Obviously, on Thanksgiving Day, Eric Ebron gives you a donut when you want a turkey. He gives you a donut. That's no good. We don't want donuts on Thanksgiving. So, Eric Ebron put up a big goose egg. We don't like that. Greg Olsen, he was in a good spot this week, but he did not produce. He had 5 targets, got 4 catches for 45 yards. Out of one of the top tight ends, you expect more out of that than him. So that's why he did make this list. So, yeah, it was no good. So some of our plug-and plays for quarterback. Now, the way I'm going to break this down is we'll not only look at it as this week, but I also want to look at it from a year perspective because we're going into week 13. The playoffs are coming around. Some of these guys might be good for 1 week. Some of these guys might be good later on in the season. Some of these guys might be good for the rest of the season. So we'll decipher between them. At quarterback, we got Tyrod Taylor, 64% owned, so he's owned in most leagues, but if he's available in your league, Sammy Watkins, he looked like he was fully healthy. He did not seem like he had any setbacks. He only had 3 targets, because I think he only had 25 snaps in the game. But he had 3 targets. He caught all 3 of them for 80 yards. If he can stay healthy, get some more playing time, that's a pretty dangerous offense when you got LaShawn McCoy and Sammy Watkins both healthy. Like we said earlier, it looks like Robert Woods could come back week 15, so that's also another weapon for that offense. And, you've seen what they could do last year, late down the line. Tyrod Taylor was throwing those bombs to Sammy Watkins, so maybe they could hook up again later on in this season. So that's just a speculative ad that you can consider. Tyrod Taylor, he is available in probably like a third of the leagues out there, so he's not widely available, but check that transaction log, folks. When you wake up, when you go to lunch, check it again. And then when you go to bed before you jerk off, check it again. We got Carson Wentz. His schedule is not great. He plays Cincinnati. He does play Cincinnati next week, and he plays Washington the week after that. But week 15 and 16, he plays Baltimore and New York. Even in a good matchup, it's kind of hard to trust Carson Wentz. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles tonight, they put up 13 points against them. The Green Bay Packers, who've been abysmal on defense, and he really couldn't do a whole lot against them. If he can't do it against them, I don't know who he can do it against. Dating back from week 4 on, he's like the 31st ranked quarterback in terms of quarterback rating. I mean, that's no good. He's obviously a rookie. He's going to have rookie mistakes. I think he has like 6 touchdowns and like 8 interceptions since then. It's not looking pretty. I mean, if you really think about it, they have no weapons. in terms of receivers. Their offensive line's not that good. They really struggle to run the ball at times. It's not a good offense. It really isn't. Ryan Tannehill does not have a good schedule going forward. He plays Baltimore, Arizona, the Giants, and Buffalo. He can remain on the waiver wire for the rest of the season. There's no need to pick him up, especially when it's a run-heavy offense. Don't worry about it, folks. Joe Flacid, don't worry about him. He doesn't really have a hard schedule, doesn't have an easy schedule either. He plays the Dolphins, and he plays New England, plays Philadelphia, he plays Pittsburgh. But, he just hasn't been scoring the touchdowns this year. I mean, he's very hard to trust. I would leave him on the waiver wire. Same thing with Alex Smith. He does play Atlanta and Oakland, but he just doesn't throw. He doesn't get the touchdowns, folks. He's not getting the rushing yards that he usually gets. He's very hard to trust. I would leave him on the waiver wire. One guy though that really does have a very good schedule going forward, Colin Kaepernick. He plays Chicago, he plays the Jets, he plays Atlanta, he plays LA. So, at least 3 of those matchups, he has a good matchup. And he is actually getting it done on the ground. I think that he's a pretty good option going forward, especially if you have a quarterback that you do like, but maybe he has a hard schedule in between now till then. That might not be a bad replacement option, Colin Kaepernick. Keep him in the back of your mind. Maybe keep him on your bench if you have the space. Very good option. No matter what kind of circumstance you're in, you're never picking up Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're never picking up Sam Bradford. You're never picking up Trevor Siemian. You can leave all 3 of them on the waiver wire. Don't just forget about them. Does not matter what their schedule is. We will go on to the running back position. To me, personally, after watching tonight, I don't know if Small would really earn a role going, like an additional role going forward. Maybe he did earn a piece of that backfield, but he didn't look spectacular last night. So, I don't know how long Ryan Matthews is out. I know he did sprain his MCL. That's a multi-week injury. So maybe he's still available in 49% of leagues. So, if you absolutely need a running back, that's not a bad ad. There's no bad ad for running back at this point, this late in the year. Especially if you know he's going to get at least 10 touches. That's not bad. Asiata, he didn't really have a lot of touches against Detroit in the Thanksgiving game, but he did get his the goal line carry. That's pretty much what you're hoping for. I know we already touched that on a little bit. I'm going to go on a rant real fast. At this point in the year, look at those teams that they look like they're not going to make the playoffs. Like teams like Arizona, teams like maybe the New Orleans Saints, the Carolina Panthers, the LA Rams, teams like that have good running backs. But maybe if they get nicked up a little bit, they're like, well, we're not we probably won't make the playoffs. This running back is, typically our franchise. Maybe we just sit them down for the rest of the year. Especially teams like LA, they have Todd Gurley, that's their franchise. Teams like the Arizona Cardinals, they got David Johnson, that's their franchise. If they get say a high ankle sprain where they're out for 1 or 2 weeks, maybe they're like, well, what's the point of bringing them back? We're out of the playoffs anyways. Let's just sit them down for the year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's a possibility. Maybe those are guys that you might want to handcuff just in case, because you never know. Some of those guys, Benny Cunningham, he's 4% owned in leagues. Andre Ellington, 3% owned in leagues. R.S. Payne and Forrest Whitaker, respectively, 3% owned in leagues. You know how I feel about those two running backs. I always love Artis Payne over Whitaker. He's the more interior rusher over them, so you know how I feel about those. But I'm not saying those are must-adds, but definitely something you want to think about if you own one of those running backs. Think about their handcuffs, because if they get nicked up, there could be a good chance they're like, oh man, we're just going to sit them. And one of the top handcuffs, Derrick Henry. I know that Tennessee's still in the playoff race, but he's 46% owned. I think he should be owned. If you do have DeMarco Murray, you should probably own Derrick Henry. He's instantly got an RB2 if something was to happen to Murray. I know Mark Gilsey, he's out right now, so you don't necessarily have to own him, but McCoy's another one of those guys. If he goes down, Gilsey is an RB2. I feel like if you have a guy like Ty Montgomery, he's 45% owned in leagues. He hasn't been getting the workload for the past 2 or 3 weeks. If you really have to drop him and make room for somebody else, be more than welcome to do that. It's not going to hurt you if you drop Ty Montgomery. Another guy is Bilal Powell. The Jets, they seem like they're out of contention. If something was to happen to Matt Forte, look, dude, this is probably your last year on the team, anyways. I don't know if we're gonna bring you back next year. I don't know what his contract situation's looking like, but maybe Bilal Powell, let's just give him the keys and see what he can do and see if he's the future. Which I don't know if he necessarily is, but he tends to get more work going towards the end of the year, anyways. So that's another decent little pickup. He's owned in only 42% of leagues. Jarrett McKinnon, 42% owned. He's actually less owned than Matt Asiata in Yahoo leagues right now. He's getting more carries than him. He's obviously going to catch more balls. The only thing he doesn't get is the goal line carries. So that is one knock on him. Matt Jones, he's owned in 39% of leagues. I don't know if people are still hoping that maybe Rob Zombie Kelly falters, which he didn't have a very good game during Thanksgiving, but I don't know if they're waiting for him to falter and for them to reactivate Matt Jones, but you shouldn't be holding on to a running back that's not even activated at this point in the year. I wouldn't worry about it too much. In Baltimore, though, there could be a changing of guard over there. Kenneth Dixon actually out-snapped and out-touched Terrence West. He had 17 touches. Maybe he gets that starting workload going forward, or maybe it's just a hot mess of a fucking timeshare. Who knows? But definitely, I'd rather have Kenneth Dixon. I'd rather have Kenneth Dixon than Matt Jones or Matt Asiata, or even Smaller at this point. I feel like he's the better own. Langford, he's simply just a backup. Thompson, simply just a backup. Parkins, you're not owning him. Another own that I think could be good is, we've said it on multiple shows already, Alfred Morris. He's 12% owned. The Dallas Cowboys, they're 10-1. Maybe if they get to week 15 or week 16, they're like, you know what? Let's give some of our guys a rest and get them saved up for the playoffs. Alfred Morris, maybe we'll give you some more work. I could definitely see that happening. So Alfred Morris is a great pickup. Some of the guys that were on IR for a long time are starting to come back. Guys like Amir Abdullah from the Lions. He was an RB2 before he went down. He could be coming back soon. So that wouldn't be a bad stash if you have an IR spot. Same thing with Charles Sims. I could see him coming back week 14, week 15 off of IR. If you have an IR spot, that's not a bad stash at all. If you're in really deep PPR leagues, Rex Burkhead, he's 4% owned in Yahoo leagues. he actually led the team in rushing yards, 29 yards over Jeremy Hill. So, he didn't really play a whole lot of snaps, but, it's like I said, if you're in a deeper PPR league, that could be an option. All right. At wide receiver, John Brown, he's 55% owned. He had a hamstring injury last game. Feel very welcome to just drop him, put him into the waiver wire. You do not need him. He has been a disaster all year, and the disaster gets even worse with the hamstring. I believe this is his second hamstring injury of the year. You really hate to see those soft tissue injuries. Just let him go, folks. Another guy that you can just cut loose is Corey Coleman. He had 7 targets, but he only really 3 of them for 38 yards. He did score a touchdown, but you gotta feel like there's just not enough volume on that Cleveland Browns offense for 2 receivers. It's one of the worst quarterback tandems in the entire league. So, you gotta think there's enough room for one guy, and that's it. And that guy is Terrell Pryor. It's not Corey Coleman. That's pretty much been the norm for Corey Coleman. Is like a 4 for 40 type of day since he broke his hand. I wouldn't get too excited about him going forward. Mohamed Sanu, he's also owned in 52% of leagues. He had 8 targets. He caught all 8 of them for 65 yards. It's a pretty good PPR day. Unfortunately, it's like his second highest target total of the year and his third highest yardage of the year. And I kind of feel like he's going to get passed up by his counterpart, Taylor Gabriel. He looks fucking fast, folks. He looks fast. He looks explosive. I believe he had 2 touchdowns this past week. He looks really good. I'd rather see him on the field than Mohamed Sanu. I know I haven't really been a big Mohamed Sanu fan, but I really like what I see out of Taylor Gabriel. I know on the last show I was talking about which receiver you would like more out of Cincinnati, either Tyler Boyd or Brandon LaFell. I was kind of leaning towards LaFell because, he's a more prototypical outside receiver that could replace A.J. Green. And Tyler Boyd, he had 9 targets. It was second on the team behind Tyler Eifert. He had 5 catches for 62 yards. And LaFell, he had 9 targets as well, but he only had 3 catches, 38 yards. Boyd is owned in 50% of leagues, so he's available in at least half the leagues out there in Yahoo. And LaFell is only owned in 18%, and it's well-deserved because he's a terrible football player. Michael Floyd, not worth the ad in my opinion. He had 5 targets with 2 catches, 31 yards. He didn't really play a whole lot in the first half. He kind of was forced into action due to the injury from John Brown. He was not very effective when he was in. And why would he be? The entire Arizona offense has not been very good this year outside of David Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald. So, that's really not too surprising. We already talked about a little bit about the Bears wide receiving core. I feel like, Marquise Wilson is a receiver that you can add that could have some success going forward. They do not have a bad schedule going forward. So, Marquise Wilson, I feel, is going to be the number 1. If you have a guy like Cameron Meredith, feel more than welcome to drop him. He's owned in 48% of leagues, and he should not be owned that high. He did have 9 targets. He only caught 2 of them for 19 yards, had a lot of drops. He just did not look good. This didn't look like he was on the same page as Barkley, and maybe Barkley just goes to the guy that's working, and that's, Marquise Wilson. Will Fuller, 44% owned. I feel like you can leave him there. I mean, he's the number 3 option on that team. Maybe the number 2, but even if he's the number 2, that's really not very worthy. Houston Texan offense with Brock Osweiler at the helm. That's just no good. Tyler Lockett, you can leave on the board. A guy that had a big game was Tyreek Hill. He was 37% owned. This is the 3rd week in a row where Macklin has missed. Tyreek Hill had 3 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown. He returned a kick. I believe he's the first player in the Kansas City offense to do that since Gale Sayers, so that's saying something. He's been a great asset. I mean, I feel like he could do some damage even if Macklin was to return. Definitely worth the ad. Pierre Garçon is not trustworthy. Anunua, he had a big game. He had 5 catches, 109 yards with a touchdown. Still not worthy of an ad, in my opinion. He's very untrustworthy. Next week, he'll go and get 3 catches for 20 yards. You're chasing points if you add Anunua. Same thing, Antoine Bolden, if you're chasing points with him. A guy that might have established a little bit of a floor, though, is Jin Jr. Yeah, since his bye week, he has 35 targets, which is 5 games. He had 35 targets. That's about 7 targets a game. He had back-to-back touchdowns in consecutive weeks. So maybe he's establishing a little bit of a floor. I know Calvin Benjamin's been a little bit frustrating down lately. Maybe Jin Jr. is the reason why. So maybe he's not. I got him as a wide receiver for very high ceiling, but a very low floor. If you guys were one of those guys that spot started Thielen, go ahead and feel free to drop him. Stephon Diggs will be back next week. You do not need him. Sammy Coates can't catch, so you can drop him. Tyler Sharp is the number 3 option on a low-volume offense. You can feel free to drop him. Like we said, you don't really have to go after LaFell. One guy to keep your eye on, though, is Dontrell Inman. He's only owned in 5% of leagues. If Tyler Williams is to miss any time, that would not be a bad ad at all. He did have a 100-yard game last week. It would not be a bad ad whatsoever. People asking about Malcolm Mitchell. He's 3% owned. He had 2 touchdowns last week, and I think a touchdown before that. Please don't add this guy. I mean, I see what he's doing, but at this point, you're chasing points. He only played less than half the snaps last week, so he's still a rotational player at best. You also got to remember, Gronk was out last week. He left the game this week, so that's probably a reason why he had to step up. I wouldn't have him, in my opinion. All right. If we go over to the tight end position, Gary Barnidge, we thought that he was going to be a nice little asset with Josh McCown at the helm. He's 57% owned. It just did not work out. He only had 2 catches. A lot of that had to do with him tweaking his knee. He left the game, so he got less snaps. I think he finished the game, but he just didn't play as many snaps. Going forward, he plays Buffalo week 15, San Diego week 16. Those are both red matchups. That's no good. I feel like if you have a better option out there, go ahead and drop him and pick him up because you don't need Barnidge going forward. And one guy I do like more than Gary Barnidge is Cameron Brate, who's also 57% owned. He actually had a pretty decent game against Seattle. He had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 49 yards. He had a touchdown that got taken away off of a penalty. And, If you look at Week 14, he plays the Saints. Week 15, he plays Dallas. In Week 16, he plays the Saints again. You can't do much better than playing the Saints twice in the playoffs. So that's a really good situation to be in. Like I said, I'd rather have Cameron Brate than Gary Barnidge. I'd rather have Cameron Brate over Julius Thomas, Dennis Pitta, CJ Fedorowicz. I'd like to have him over all those guys. He's probably like one of my favorite tight ends going forward. That's not one of those high-end guys. And speaking of Julius Thomas, he's 53% owned. He did play last week. You can just drop him. He hasn't really done shit all year, so feel free to drop him, pick somebody else up that's more worthy. But one of those guys that's not worthy is Dennis Pitta. Me and him both have not scored a touchdown the past 3 years, so we have a lot in common. Even against the pitiful Browns, he had 3 catches for 34 yards. He has not been getting it done this year, so he's been continuously disappointing you. Let him disappoint on the waiver wire. Yeah? CJ Fedorowicz, 35% owned. He had 6 targets. He caught 4 of them for 42 yards. His schedule gets a little bit easier going forward. You're kind of hoping for a touchdown on this guy. He gets it sometimes, but I was liking his targets share for the past couple weeks, but it's starting to go down a little bit, so I'm not as high on him. That Darius Green, he's 10% owned. He did have 2 big catches, 67 yards, but he's still only playing a handful of snaps. It's not something that you can depend on from week to week. He does get to play Cincinnati week 15 and Atlanta week 16, so look to see if his snap percentage can go up for next week and week 14 against Buffalo. So we'll see what his snap percentage looks like going forward. If it improves, he has a couple of nice matchups going forward in the playoffs. But it's definitely a situation you want to monitor, not necessarily a situation you can trust, though. One situation that I think could be underrated is McDonald, tight end from San Francisco. He had 8 targets, 4 catches for 60 yards. His remaining schedule looks pretty good. He gets to play the Chicago Bears without Trevathan. He gets to play the Jets. He gets to play Atlanta. And week 16 he does get LA, but that's not a bad schedule whatsoever. He's been one of those guys that has been working underneath for Kaepernick. That's where he likes to throw. He doesn't like to throw to the outside receivers, as we've seen with Torrey Smith, who did have a touchdown, but still only had 3 catches, 20 yards, something like that. But McDonald's been a favorite target of Kaepernick, so that's really not a bad play at all. I know in the last show we were hitting on a little bit of the Jordan Reed injury. I could easily see him missing like 1 to 2 to 3, even 3 games. So, I mean, if he's to miss any time, Vernon Davis would not be a bad ad. He was actually producing a little bit, even when Jordan Reed was playing. So that's definitely not a bad ad at all. He's only owned in 9% of leagues. Definitely, if you have the space in your roster, you can definitely add him. He'd be a nice asset for you. But, other than that, that is pretty much all we have for this waiver wire show. As well, let you guys know that we will be ramping up our show. I'm going to try to redo the intro, try to update it a little bit for you guys. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, Fifth Downers. You can find us on iTunes. Please feel free to rate and review us on there. We're also found on Spreaker, Blog Talk Radio, Podcast Addict. We are on a lot of different sites, pretty much anything you can think of. Please feel free to visit our site, www.the/fifth/down.com. We have our latest episodes right there on the home page. It automatically autoplays, so you don't even have to press a button. Also, if you look on that front page, we also have a link for anyone who is interested in writing. We are looking for some writers. Obviously, we are two busy guys that are always busy in the military, so we could definitely use some help writing some articles, giving you guys some extra fantasy goo to give you that extra down advantage that you need to win your leagues. Also, feel free to go on our website, www.the/fifth/down.com/FFPN, the Fantasy Football Network. We got over 20 different podcasts on this page that all cover something new and something exciting. It's all fantasy related. We got redraft leagues, dynasty leagues. We got some DFS shows. We got some IDP shows. The IDP Blitz, one of my favorites. Please check that out. It's all different shows giving you different perspectives, giving you different football knowledge. Check that out, definitely. But other than that, we promised to finally get, like I said, Kimo was on this show earlier. For some reason, his voice to record, it was just mine. The audio recorder only loved my voice. It got too late for him, so I had to re-record this show, but we promised we'll get him back on Wednesday for our matchup and ranking show. It's gonna be a good one, I promise you. Also, check out on Friday, we're going to try and get the Daily Fantasy Ace on our show to talk a little bit of DFS with us. This guy is a master at projections. He's dangerously close to everything, so we definitely want to pick his brain a little bit. We also have a new writer. Like I said, we were looking for new writers. We did find one to add to our staff, Michael Duggar. He does like matchup articles and Vegas spreads, a lot of shit that we like to talk about during our matchup show, so that's really great. We'll definitely highlight his articles in our show, so look forward to that. But other than that, that'll pretty much do it for today's show. Fifth Downers, thank you for tuning in. Stay classy.